Drummond Live with Progressive News, and we're back on the air. We just got shut down for some reason. Apparently, Jeff Bezos didn't like me talking about his stuff here. And where was that? Find my place.
Over the past decade, we've been getting dumber by watching smart things, like this smartphone, or this smart TV, this smart guy, or this smart ass. And now we can add the use of privacy-deficient smart home devices like Amazon's Alexa or Google Home to that list. Ultimately, the decision to buy something that can tell you how many miles per hour you shit is a choice you made. But many American renters aren't getting that choice. That's because landlords...
Now, does it strike you as odd that YouTube would cut me off right in the middle of this segment?
And management companies across the country are forcing residents into using smart home features that they never asked for.
Some new apartments require renters to use Amazon smart home devices. A group called the Amazon Smart Properties team is working with property managers to equip new buildings with Alexa smart speakers.
Questions remain. How much do we want companies to know about our private lives?
Kind of makes me glad my house was built back in low-tech 1962.
Mine was built in 68, so
there
yes.
you go. No smart homes. My home is dumb, and I am happy about it.
Do you guys have indoor plumbing?
No.
Outhouse. The 60s. Holy
And no
smokes.
electricity either.
If he thought houses built in the 60s didn't have indoor plumbing, then I'm pretty sure he should be the one in her dumb home. But this technology will continue to stay on the lips of reporters like him, since the smart home market could reach $53 billion by 2022. And it's not just Amazon. According to CNET, more than 250,000 units nationwide are outfitted with smart home gadgets from other companies, such as Vivint, Stratus, Latch, and SmartRent. And in most cases, your data is fair game for advertisers and marketers. When New York City artist Mary Beth McKenzie told CNET her building replaced her physical keys with Latch smart locks, she rejected the switch since it would mean consenting to Latch taking her GPS location. After voicing concerns with her landlord, McKenzie told CNET, "I said I don't want to be tracked, and he laughed," the 72-year-old said. Which proves no matter how old you are as a woman, someone will always delight in taking away your right to choose. But if that landlord really wanted to laugh at what someone in their 70s said, he could have just turned on his smart TV and he would have had plenty of fucking options.
Truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth.
But smart home technology has become not only a tool to keep invasive tabs on residents, but to get around housing laws that keep apartments affordable. After the New York State Assembly passed a rent stabilization law this summer, the smart home surveillance company GateGuard sent emails to New York landlords with the subject line, "GateGuard, 3 steps to destabilize NYC units even after the new law," and opens with the sentence, "You can raise rents in NYC." The email goes on to say, use the GateGuard AI doorman intercom to catch illegal sublets, non-primaries, Airbnbs, so you can vacate a unit, and combine a $950 a month studio and a $1,400 a month one-bedroom into a $4,200 deregulated 2-bedroom. Before founding GateGuard, its CEO, Ari Tiemann, created the website subletspy.com that helped landlords ID illegal sublets. But Tiemann can't claim any moral high ground when it comes to the use of Airbnbs, because according to CNET, he was inspired to create the Sublet Spy website after he rented his own apartment to a man named David on Airbnb in 2014, and it was used for an orgy that cost him over $23,000 in damages. It wasn't until Tiemann Googled David's phone number that he discovered they were flocking to his pad for a $20 per person booty bash advertised on Twitter. It's a reasonable expectation that any couple renting your Airbnb is probably gonna bone in it at least once. But since David claimed he was riding solo, then Tiemann should have covered his booty bash bases. Like the clause for my Airbnb, which says, if you're gonna throw a booty bash, I get a 35% cut of the door sales, or I'll triple charge you on the cleaning fee. But since Gate Guard's technology will do more to harass tenants than sift out wrongdoers, it's a reminder we need actual laws on the books to deal with tenants' rights on smart home devices. And at least one state is working on it. This spring, New York Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal introduced a bill that would limit what personal info landlords can collect from residents using smart home devices. The bill would guarantee that tenants have a traditional method of getting into their homes, including building entrances and common areas like elevators and garages. Until there's legislation, your options are to either fight it in court or move. Both expensive and time-consuming things if you rent. But if you willingly use these devices, you could choose to ditch Alexa like I did and get an Alex instead. I'll demonstrate. Alex, please lower the temperature by 10 degrees.
How long do I have to keep doing this?
Until you pay off your cleaning fee from the booty bash you held in my apartment last month.
It was less of a booty bash, more of a booty buffet.
Okay, so obviously Google's out of, out of control. We have to redo everything. I mean, it's just getting nuts. And even when they try to redo things, they just make things worse.
I've heard that expert says you need 10,000 hours to be good at photography. I say it's not true. My name is Drummond and I...
The most recent tragedy happened in Brooklyn.
A woman on a bike was killed after colliding with a truck. CBS 2's Andrea Grimes has the story.
Police tape and memorial candles mark the intersection in Williamsburg where 28-year-old cyclist Deborah Freelander was hit and killed by a cement truck. We're freezing the surveillance video before the impact. Police say the truck yesterday afternoon had the green light. Cyclists point out this area at Bushwick Avenue and Wareham Street has no bike lanes. This latest fatal accident is reigniting debate about sharing the roads.
I think bikes should be on the road. I mean, like, how are we going to get around?
A lot of them just speed right through. A lot don't look. A lot of them aren't thinking. It's just not one side. It's both sides.
Police say there have been 15 cyclists killed so far this year. That's more than the 10 killed in all of 2018. Mayor de Blasio says it's a crisis.
We've done a lot of enforcement on speeding by vehicles and failure to yield. We're going to do more of that because I find every time we do more, it has a positive impact.
To that end, the NYPD announced a citywide traffic initiative through Sunday, July 21st. They'll be looking for drivers who speed, fail to yield to pedestrians and cyclists, talk or text while driving, obstruct a bike lane, and other infractions. When asked about driver and pedestrian concerns regarding bikers who also don't follow the rules of the road, the police commissioner said this.
If a bicyclist is seriously injured or killed, we're not looking to go back there and ticket bicyclists. Bicyclists have to be responsible, but as I said, there's a huge difference between a 2 or 3 ton vehicle and a 20 or 30 pound bicycle.
In 2018, the NYPD says they issued more than 1 million moving violations. More than 34,000, or about 3% of them, went to cyclists.
The DOT tweeted they continue to redouble their Vision Zero efforts by engineering safer streets and adding more bike lanes. The department promises more details later this month on a new cyclist safety plan. In Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Andrea Grimes, CBS.
This is another situation where it seems like you have two problems and they could solve themselves. So like we have unemployment, So why don't we revamp our entire transportation system, make tunnels that go like separate bike lanes, separate e-bike lanes, separate pedestrian lanes where they're all separated and protected, and have them go under the road here at an intersection, come back up on the other side where they're still separate, where they're all separate, and completely solve this problem. Of course, bicycles are going to crash into bicycles, pedestrians are going to run into each other, e-bikes or scooters are going to crash into each other from time to time, and cars are going to crash into each other, and separate out the big trucks too. You know, have a separate transportation system for like supplying people with the things that they like, companies that get packages, supermarkets, Walmart type markets, maybe put all of that underground. I mean, I was talking earlier about wealth. Well, if a city invested like a huge amount of money into doing that, what I'm talking about, then wouldn't you consider that city wealthy? Because they have all that infrastructure. That's wealth. That's wealth. That's real wealth. You know, some guy on his yacht sipping champagne. That doesn't mean shit to me. I can't see him, and I don't care that, you know, it's the rest of the people and the way they're living that implies wealth to me. Let's look at what's going on in another city.
Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield can help you get a great plan at a great rate.
In Singapore, a group of e-scooter riders gathered at a Meet the People session, or MPS, in Ang Mo Kio on Wednesday. They were hoping to speak to an MP to voice their concerns over the recent e-scooter ban on footpaths. Based on what CNA observed, there were about 50 delivery riders of all ages, and almost all were wearing green GrabFood delivery uniforms. Some said they came before 6 p.m., even though the session starts at 8 p.m. A number arrived in e-scooters which were parked nearby. Those who used the devices to ride to work were also waiting around. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong helms the ward. His Meet the People session is held at this block along Ang Mo Kio Avenue 3. Delivery riders who spoke to CNA said they couldn't work because of the ban and asked for special exemptions to be made for them. Volunteers at this session told CNA that they took down the riders' concerns and have referred them to the Land Transport Authority. In a Facebook post, Law and Home Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam also said he met at least 30 e-scooter riders at his Meet the People session on Tuesday. He called it a good civil meeting and heard the difficulties of these riders. He added that he will be calling for another meeting and will convey views to the Transport Ministry and to the Cabinet.
So these problems aren't just in our country. And in Singapore, I guess where that was, you've got people who can't work because of the lack of infrastructure. Now, this is very much a Bernie thing because he talks about investing millions in infrastructure, billions maybe, and putting people back to work. So, you know, it's all tied together. And of course, e-bikes and motor scooters and things like that for getting around, they're usually caused by, you know, low wealth. So people are having to sacrifice not being in cars all the time. And, obviously that creates problems. And then on top of that, they lose their jobs because they can't e-bike around, e-scooter, whatever. And, we're moving into the future, but I feel like it's more slowly because rich people don't care about developing the economy. They've got what they want, and they're not interested in developing the infrastructure, because the infrastructure is where the peasants are, the bike paths, the e-bike paths, the being on foot, and even the car lanes to a certain extent, which they join in on that, but unless they're flying by helicopter or something, which does go on. But basically, rich people don't have to deal with that kind of stuff like we do.
Hello and welcome to Fully Charged. Rivian. It is the name that everybody is talking about in the automotive industry. What is Rivian? Well, we decided to go and find out. Well, I say we, I meant Chelsea Sexton really, because she lives a little bit closer to America than Robert and me. And if you can't wait to see this car in the metal, we are delighted to confirm that it will be on display at Fully Charged Live USA in February 2020.
All the happy people. I guess they know that they're probably the only ones who are going to have cars like this. And they're probably the only ones, because it's a capitalist society, who will have electronic vehicles for a long time. It's funny how they take something that's supposed to help everybody, and they turn it into something for them, but not the rest of us. I know I can't afford a Tesla. Where are all the little tiny electric cars? The kind, for $5,000 or $10,000. India's making even the little tiny gas cars, because they produce tiny bit of pollution compared to a big engine. They're operating on 2 cylinders and stuff.
Let's start with a bit of background.
Okay.
What made you want to do an electric car?
And they're moving forward, but look at the type of people who are benefiting from it. It's all the rich people, or at least well-to-do. And they're not really developing with the people in mind. And that's the craziness about it. I mean, even Hitler developed the VW Bug, the people's car. Volkswagen, Volks car. Folky, Folk, F-O-L-K. And I have another one here. I mean, they're flying along with this stuff, and they've had, a century to develop it. The first car was an electric car. And then the rich people came in and they decided to go with gas, and they took it all over and made it a vehicle for them to make millions and millions of dollars. And there's another video, but I don't know if it's in here, that talks about they've got the new hydrogen fuel cell, and they're saying that's going to be what changes everything for cars. But will we get to benefit from it? Will there be affordable hydrogen fuel cars? Or will this just be another thing for the rich? What is this? This might be it.
Well, for more insight into China's auto market, Lauren Fix joins us from Las Vegas. She is the president of Automotive Aspects and also known as the Car Coach. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I mean, hydrogen-powered cars, is this the wave of the future?
Absolutely. Actually, hydrogen was something that was a technology that had been worked on before the Obama administration here in the U.S. They had thought this was going to be the new transition. They had fuel cells they had tested with hydrogen powering combustion engines, and this technology works. And out the tailpipe, you have water, and we have an abundance of hydrogen in the air. There was just no infrastructure. When the next administration came in here in the U.S., it became battery powered, and so forth. This technology got shelved. So now we're merging the two technologies together by using hydrogen, and I have driven these vehicles both by Hyundai and by Honda, who have tested them for quite a while in California, and it works. It's easy to fill up, just like we're used to, and it powers battery-powered vehicles.
Yeah, probably solving some of the problems that we see when it comes to those electric vehicles. I mean, some of these cars, they're on display right now at the China International Import Expo. What do you think the goal of the auto importers at that event is at this point?
Well, at this point, they're looking to try to increase some of the sales in China. Although sales have been soft for the last 15 or 16 months, and basically the sales of Chinese-built vehicles are dropped off, they're trying to fill that void. They're even bringing the Corvette, which is a gasoline-powered vehicle, and coming out for 2020. It's going to be there, and that's going to be a very exciting product, and maybe that's their thinking. They need to bring some more exciting products, and even though China is trying to get all the manufacturers to produce more plug-in vehicles, and 60% is what the government is demanding by 2035.
Yeah, but that being the case, I mean, this is really a strategic industry for the Chinese government, but we've seen that sales of these electric vehicles, these hybrid vehicles, they've been tumbling right along with regular car sales in China. And part of this is because the government has been relaxed in some of these great incentives that they've had for the last couple of years. Do you think they're going to have to reinstate?
Okay, so what I'm seeing is outside of China, everything's just rolling along. The rich are getting all their fantasy stuff out, and I mean, look what they have now. Where did it go? Here it is. And you have to ask yourself, where's the right in developing everything for the rich and not coming up with solutions for the poor and the lower classes? You know, so all this stuff sounds great. This is the difference between wealth and wealth. I define wealth as, you know, look around you. And you know, maybe the Chinese, with their kind of communist past, and they're still kind of communist, you know, which is a good thing, whether you want to believe it or not. I'm a communist, and all that communism means to me is that I care about my neighbors, you know, all of them. That's what communism means to me. It doesn't mean, you know, splitting up all the money amongst us. Money doesn't really even, it's not a realistic way of looking at wealth. But, you know, I hope that somebody out there is developing, you know, cars with little gas engines, cars with electricity, hybrid, gas, electric, tiny cars, and the infrastructure for them to be safe. You know, where we would separate out tiny cars so they're not being run over by big SUVs. And I got to tell you that, you know, big SUVs and big pickup trucks, I know who the people are out there who are all driving them. And I got to say that all they care about is themselves. You know, if they get into a crash, they don't really care that, you know, some poor little guy who can't afford a big car gets killed. They don't really care about the infrastructure being built that would separate the two. You know, maybe you would have 3 lanes on a road, and two of them would be for small cars, and then they'd have one for big SUVs and shit. You know, let them crash into each other. Fuck, man. If they don't give a shit about the rest of us, let them kill each other in their big SUVs, but get them away from everybody else. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have big cars or trucks or whatever available to us. But do we really need a giant pickup truck every day for going back and forth to work and stuff? I'm telling you, they're doing it just to protect them and their kids, and they just don't give a shit about the rest of us. And of course, it's not California, only California, but the rest of the rest of the world seems to be on fire. And there's a reason for this.
Well, another report says the Amazon forest is drying out and human activity is to blame. A new NASA study says that over the past couple of decades, moisture levels in the atmosphere above the Amazon have noticeably dropped, which is putting the jungle in peril. RT America's Alex Mihailovich joins us with more. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Steve.
All right, so let me ask you, some call the Amazon the lungs of the planet, and if that's not healthy, that could mean problems for the entire human population. So what could you tell us about what's going on?
Well, absolutely. It's what you mentioned off the top. So this dryness is happening in the atmosphere above the Amazon. And what happens then, over the past couple of decades, NASA has seen that this has really been on the rise. What happens is that the forest needs more water. So there's a demand for more water from other places. But at the same time, it's very difficult to make up for that atmospheric, usually the moisture that exists there. So what happens then? Well,
so really, when you look at activism and environmentalism, it's the people trying to get together to look after themselves, right? They're just trying to say, look, we see something that's going to affect the poorest, the worst, right? All the pollution and everything is all being pushed off onto the poor. All the environment, climate change is affecting the poorest people. They're losing their land and just, you know, a multitude of things, and you probably know more about it than I do. But every time people do this, they run up against enormous pushback, right? So Greta and survival, extinction, you know, they get thrown in jail. They claim that they have to become more and more militant in order to make a splash, get their message out. And the more that they try and do stuff, the more pushback they get, right? Constantly arrested and stuff. And like this, like No matter how good the idea is, doesn't really matter.
Hope that our success in California is going to inspire activists and advocates.
Welcome to Redacted Tonight, VIP. I'm Lee Camp. Today I talk with Trinity Tran, the co-founder and because we are heavily suppressed. Okay, I'll be right back with a lot more. Welcome back. I'm still Lee Camp. Here now is my interview with the co-founder and lead organizer of Public Bank Los Angeles, which is helping to create a nationwide movement, Trinity Tran. Trinity, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
So you're the co-founder and lead organizer of Public Bank LA. Public banking is the idea that the city's money should go into a bank owned by the people, the public, rather than a corporate big bank, and thereby that money can help the people in the city in a lot of different ways, as well as take back some of the control that big banks have over us. Last time I had on someone from your organization, there was about to be a vote on a ballot initiative, which you guys then barely lost. But now Governor Newsom has signed a bill to allow public banking anyways.
It's really kind of funny because, of course, my dad is an arch conservative, but in a lot of ways, he was more of a libertarian or, one of these modern Republicans who just... Well, I'll just tell you what he told me. I remember when I was a little kid, him telling me, well, the thing is that, because he was still a little guy, and he always really was compared to the real big people. He was always working for the big people, doing their dirty work. But he said, the thing is a guy like me could never really get ahead because there's always a middleman. You got to pay interest to the bank or whatever, right? So he was complaining about the oligarchs always being in control of you, always being in control of your success. And he basically had to kowtow to them and pay them. But then on the other hand, he was a religious, he was a evangelical, but which goes along with the territory, right? But he was also a racist, and because as that guy in the middle, he felt just as threatened by minorities. So he would talk about how he couldn't get anywhere because the blacks were getting all the financial aid and nobody cared about him. And to a large extent, I think that he, by will alone, helped create this idea, this new Gingrich idea of the silent majority, the millions of white men in the middle who couldn't get heard and were constantly, if you're Donald Trump, you got your start. But all these white men in the middle who felt like they were part of white male America, and that made them I guess entitled, but they felt like, they were getting it from both sides. But obviously his solution would have been to go to the left, where we're trying to create systems that take care of everybody. But that didn't really fit in with his conservative side. And ultimately, as far as his point of view goes, ultimately, he got wealthy because he supported the racism and the, taking care of number one as part of the white population. He ended up benefiting eventually, but only by, like I say, doing, you know, the man's dirty work, you know.
Is that right?
Yes, we led the Measure B.
And the same is true today. I mean, how does a white guy make money now? He goes gets a job with Blackwater or one of these places, you know. He goes and gets in the army and moves up very quickly because he is a white guy, and then gets out and works, you know, within that system.
Ballot measure campaign in Los Angeles last year, and we had 4 months to organize on a grassroots budget, minimal funding with no.
But this is about pushback. This is about people who have great ideas that will help the people, and all they get is pushback, constant.
Infrastructure, trying to change a section in the Los Angeles City Charter to pave the path for an LA City Bank. And we came close. We got 44% of the vote with 430,000 people voicing their support for a public bank. And we immediately took that momentum and pivoted.
And like, wow, what's so bad about a public bank? It'll do so much good for so many people. And who are these people who they don't want it? Well, obviously it's the bankers, right? They don't think anybody should be sticking their nose in their business, even though their business is about financing and wealth and for all the people. So 99% of the effect that they have is on regular people. And they don't think the regular people should have any say in it, and they don't like that. I was thinking of another example. There's lots of examples, though, where like that.
Towards a statewide effort. And just last month, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill, and now California is the first state in a century to enable cities and counties in California to create their own.
And eventually she's going to talk about how even though they won the right to have a people's bank or whatever, public banking, she talks about all these rules and regulations and hurdles that they're going to have. And in fact, that's the second layer of protection that the bankers create. You know, it's just like if you want justice, you have to get a lawyer. You know, it's not enough that you can just go in and say, well, look, I'm innocent because da 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 da. Because you're not allowed to do that under their system. It's their way of keeping you out. There's nothing difficult about law. Anybody who's had an argument at the dinner table and talked about, you know, a little girl says, yeah, but that's not fair. That's what law is. It's as simple as that. That's how it came to be, and that's all it is. Now, it may get complicated when you start talking about all kinds of different things, like different kinds of companies and all the myriad of situations, but that's not really the law that most of us would be involved in, right? We'd be involved with, well, he stole my bicycle, he stole my car, that cop shot my unarmed kid. You know, it's not like you have to be Einstein to understand that it was unfair and how it was unfair and why. But they're going to make it so that you can't get involved. Or you have to get somebody else to come in who doesn't know the situation or you or anything about it, and he's supposedly an expert, so he's able to do things. Well, all he knows how to do is navigate the system. In my case, when I got arrested and falsely charged and falsely convicted and falsely imprisoned, my lawyer, a public defender, didn't know anything really about the case or anything. I mean, he listened to me and I explained it to him, but to this day he's never represented me properly, because my case, and it wouldn't have helped anyway, his job is to lose. Public defenders, their job is to lose. I asked him, well, you know, you go up against these prosecutors all the time. What's your success rate? How many times have you won? And he got mad and he wouldn't tell me. I'm guessing that he only wins like once in a long, long while. And that's when they fuck up somehow. But he wanted to argue my case as, oh, it's thought crime and all this stuff. And while that makes sense, he didn't understand how to fight and maybe because he knows you can't fight it the way I would fight it. I would fight it simply by what I explained to you earlier before we got cut off by Google, and say, you know what? Just telling people how somebody else makes you feel because they're doing bad things to you, how you can't make that illegal. I mean, freedom of speech. You know, I have a right to describe how somebody else makes me feel, even if it does make me feel like I want to kill them. You know, feel like. I'm not saying I would or anything, but if I want to describe how they make me feel, how am I going to describe it if you're going to throw me in jail every time I open my mouth? You know, this is total freedom of speech, and I can understand it. And grant you, I've taken law in school, but I didn't learn any of this from that. I mean, this is just a simple matter of arguing at the dinner table, being able to make your point. And I've always made my parents mad because they claim that I'm wrong all the time, but I'm just really able to persuasive. I'm really persuasive. Well, in fact, that's all that the lawyers are doing. They're trying to be persuasive. They're just not very good at it. But you know what the most persuasive argument is? The truth. Because anybody can go out and show you why the truth is the truth based on reality. So anyway, so these people, and they have the truth on their side, most certainly. Public banking and public systems for economics, they help people instead of rich people, you know, the 1%.
Public banks. So we lost the battle, we won the war, and it's been an incredibly exciting fight because this bill, AB
But she hasn't, in fact, won the war, and she'll explain why.
857, the Public Banking Act, was a grassroots-initiated bill, drafted, conceived of from the grassroots, that challenged the most powerful corporate lobbyists in the world and succeeded.
Yeah, congratulations to all of you. I mean, you were, and you really still are, up against some incredibly powerful, well-funded entities. The big banks that rule our country do not want to see public banking take off across the country. How did you win this fight? How did you make this happen?
Well, It was an incredibly complex, complicated labyrinth of a process to move through the California state legislature. And it was a first for many of us, which made this win even more incredible, considering the might of our opposition, considering that we had no rules, no playbook, no funding, no lobbyists as we were going into this fight. So we had to maneuver through the political arena in both the California State Senate and Assembly. We had to move through 6 legislative committees examining the fiscal impact, the local government impact, the oversight of public banks in California. We had to write amendments. We had to negotiate amendments with the chair of the committees and their banking staffers, ensuring that the strongest version of the bill passed through each of the committees. We had to
Really, people? I've put this on Facebook and a number of groups, and nobody can be bothered to watch me. You know, Jimmy Dore gets, and I think I'm better than Jimmy Dore. I think I have a better program. I mean, just watch this. You can tell me that my recording of this, the video that will be put up, it should attract millions of people. Because, you know, I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart. I'm just trying to help everybody and trying to help people understand. And why is it that nobody watches? Why is there 0 people watching? I mean, who am I going to blame? Am I going to blame YouTube? Are they fucking with me? Making sure nobody sees my video? I've got 47. I've been advertising this to people for, you know, years now, at least a year and probably more. And I only get 46 subscribers, and none of them come and watch. Are people that? Is it the people on Facebook and stuff? Nobody's even interested. Or on YouTube, nobody's interested. Or is Google doing something? Isn't that crazy?
Mobilize popular support from across the state of California. We had to create public citizens lobbying team to be able to combat Wall Street lobbyists who are trying to kill this bill every step of the way. So this was ultimately an epic street fight between Main Street and Wall Street, and we won by being able to outmaneuver and out-organize the opposition. And you know what?
I was going to say I'm very happy there's people like you to do the nitty-gritty work of, like, you know, crafting amendments and pushing amendments, and because I just like to get on TV and just scream about things and hope that some.
And I know I sound jealous, but why is it that all these pretty people, you know, even Lee Camp's a pretty boy, kind of an ugly pretty boy, but and this pretty girl, and why do they all get to be successful and go on? Even though there's obviously plenty of people who are, I say, more talented and try harder, but they can't get any success. Even when they're trying to do the same thing as she is, you know. It strikes me as more than a coincidence that if you're attractive in a what would you call it, traditional or commercial kind of way, then you get pushed along, whereas everybody else gets pushed to the wayside.
Someone will do something. So it seems like you guys really did something, starting with just moving the discussion, right? Getting people to understand what public banking is. I mean, was that tough, getting people to just not be bored by the term public banking?
Yeah.
And you know, people like me, or let's just take me, like I said, I tried to use myself as an example and got thrown in jail, but I've been talking about this stuff since I was 14, because my dad talked to me about it and talked what I told you just a minute ago about how he felt about, You know, there's always a middleman who's going to want to take basically the big most of the pie while you do all the work. So that's got very much to do with public banking, because the hope is that public banks will finance people who have great ideas without taking most of their money that they make, whereas bankers and money men and all that kind of thing, they take it all. So, you know, I've been talking about the barrier to entry created by banks because of stuff that my dad said like that. And does anybody listen to me? Well, you know what? I think they do, because it's uncanny the way I'll talk about something and I'll even Google it and not find it anywhere, you know, because I figure, well, I want to see if I'm really the first person talking about it. And I find out that I am. And then a couple weeks later, or maybe a month or 2 months or whatever, oh, gee, somebody else is getting all famous saying what I said.
Yeah, absolutely. We had to move this conversation from.
But there are always people who are pretty and they've got a certain tone to their voice, the way they speak and everything. I mean, maybe people just don't like my voice. I know it's different, you know. And a lot of times when you hear people with different voices, they are stupid, you know, or they're weird or something. But I'm not. I'm just smart. You know, I've just got lots of great ideas. I'm very inventive and creative. So, anyway, you know, I don't really care. I mean, I suppose I care, but from a reasonable, logical point of view, I don't really care. You know, you only live once, and hey, if nobody cares about you and nobody is interested in the great things you have to say, and I'll tell you what, here's something that you're going to really regret, because you may not be interested in me, but I have secrets, lots of them, secret ways. I'll give you some examples. Examples of things you'll never think of yourself, and you guys will never do yourself, and the rich will never do themselves. And because they want to keep me down, the world will never have them. So I have a solution to the drought in California and probably a number of other places. Matter of fact, I'm sure a number of other places. I have an invention that I came up with that will end the drought. Forest fires everywhere. I have an invention which will end forest fires. No problem. Completely end forest fire situation. I have, God, I have so many of them. I have a way of making people immortal. Right now, I call it the poor man's immortality. It's a way that right now, if I had a big company and you know, lots of resources, I could make it, I could sell, or I would probably give it away, but to the right people for sure, where you would live forever throughout all time, as long as human beings, as long as the human race survived. You would be able to live throughout all time. How about that one, huh? That's like the big one, right? I mean, you guys sitting around arguing and bitching at each other, and there's some little guy sitting in Lexington, Kentucky, who could make you immortal. Well, when you're all dead, because nobody really dies anyway, but when you're all dead, you can wish that you can come back, but you won't be able to. Now, they're going to solve immortality anyway, and yeah, they may even solve it so that you can be immortal in your own body and never have a break, in your life. But sooner or later, you're going to get killed, right? Some car's going to splatter your brains all over the pavement. Something. And the bodily form of immortality that they're working on, age reversal and stuff like that, that's not going to save you from that one. The one I have will save you from that one. And I know you're all sitting around going, "Oh, he's full of shit. He thinks he knows what he's talking about, but he doesn't." So I'm not losing anything because, well, I'll tell you what. You're wrong. I do have this. I've come up with a number of, a matter of fact, I'll give you one. One I came up with a long time ago is like a wind turbine inside of a balloon. So you put them on these cables and you fill them with helium or something, and they're like big donuts, and they go up real high in the air. I don't mind giving away this one, but believe me, I'm holding back so much that everybody in the future is going to pay for ignoring me. So, and I'm doing it purely out of spite. I mean, absolutely. Actually, I'm doing it out of reason. I say spite to piss people off, but the reason I'm doing it is, I mean, how do you deserve any of my brilliance? How do you deserve all my great ideas if you don't even want to recognize the fact that they're my ideas? And the last thing I want to be is famous, but a little bit of acknowledgement. Yeah, I don't want everybody else getting credit for what I do. So I tell you how to be immortal. Somebody else gets famous for it. And I don't want the fame. I want to give my gifts and just be recognized for the fact that I came up with them. And I don't want the negative effects, because with fame and fortune and all that, I just want to live out my life like I'm living it right now. I don't want any money. So with all those things come bad things. John Lennon, for example. I don't want that. Of course, I probably won't ever be killed because I'm famous. I'll probably be killed by the oligarchy who hates people like me, right? Who fight for other people. And I don't really fight. I just bitch about it, right? That's why I'm such a good journalist. Anyway, ideas. I could go on for half an hour about them. I didn't really ever call it a public bank, but I've always talked about non-profit banks. Zero profit. Would obviously have to be regulated because you'd have to protect people who have great ideas, and it would involve patenting and copyrights and stuff like that, which aren't really done properly now. It's a for-profit system where people in government make sure that their friends get money from the system, jobs and leadership positions, big jobs. I mean, even in government, there's like I mean, if you get $150,000 in a year from the government, you're obviously in a special, right? A special place. But I've talked about nonprofit banks for a long time. And what would stop somebody who's got a lot of money from going out and setting up a nonprofit bank? Nothing. Nothing. It would require no investment. I mean, as a nonprofit, the person who invested all their money in it would get it all back, right? So it would involve nothing. All they'd have to do is set it up like any other bank, except for at the end of the day, no money goes to anybody except for, there'd be regulated wages and salaries to keep it nonprofit. Nonprofit system we have now, the head of the Salvation Army makes, I don't know how much, millions. That's not a nonprofit. How can it be a nonprofit if the guy running it makes millions? And who knows who else is making money off of it? And the Red Cross, these are all jokes. So it's Orwellian, right? Definitely Orwellian. So nonprofit is not nonprofit. But somebody could go out and set up a nonprofit bank and it wouldn't cost them a dime. But why don't they? Because the oligarchy doesn't allow competition. Nonprofit competition obviously is the ultimate business model for beating out any capitalist endeavor. So you set up a nonprofit corn company, right? They sell you packets of frozen corn in the supermarket. And because they are nonprofit, they can put a lower price on their corn in the supermarket. All the capitalist companies who make corn go out of business and get gobbled up by the nonprofit company. That is the natural outcome of such a situation. This scares the shit out of capitalists, right? What if it caught on? What if somebody saw the nonprofit bank gobble up the entire banking system? What if they decided, well, if it works for banking system, why don't we sell corn non-profit? And it gobbles up all the corn. Peas, beds, cars, houses. All of a sudden the entire system would be based on non-profit because it produces the product at the lowest price. What if you created a system where people who had great ideas like me had access to capital simply because they had great ideas? They didn't have to walk into a bank and explain their great idea to a banker, a profit capitalist banker, who takes his idea and tells him, oh, he's full of shit and it's a bad idea, and doesn't give him the loan or however they want to work it, investment. And then a few years later, a vastly capitalistic, successful company emerges with this guy's idea, right? So what if you had a bank like this, like she's talking about, or a non-profit bank like I'm talking about, and it actually studied people's ideas and realistically and objectively could most of the time decide when it's a good idea or a bad idea. And some guy came to them and said, I think I could make a personal computer, it's 1980, and sell it and make lots of non-profit. And he does it. And everybody in the United States and around the world gets computers for, half price what we pay for them now and in the past. And it becomes an enormous success, becomes maybe even a monopoly because it's producing at half the price and nobody can ever compete with them. And it's a win-win for everybody. The people, the guy is famous and he's got a big company, but he's not rich because he just gets paid his salary as the guy who invented it and came up with it. A good one and probably lifetime type salary situation. Certainly enviable, but not a billionaire. Not a Bill Gates. Okay, so let's say one guy does that, and then other people around the country look at him and go, wow, I think I'll try that. Eventually it would do the same thing. People forming non-profit companies and would have access to capital, and they would take over, so more or less, so to speak, even though they wouldn't be Bill Gates. Do you see how that's a threat to the capitalist system? No matter how good the idea, it doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not you're a threat to the oligarchy. And if you are, then this is what happens. And I guarantee you, they will just beat her down and beat her down. Sooner or later, her idea, which is great, and which isn't hers, but it's been around for ages, will be allowed by the oligarchy within a certain constraint so as not to infringe on the oligarchy. Just like the electric car, the rich have been squashing the electric car for 30 or 40 years now. The first one was I think a Ford or something, and the people who bought them loved them. Matter of fact, the rich got together and said, okay, let's pass a law or something demanding that they return their electric vehicle that they love so well. And people out and out refused to return them because they loved them so much. But eventually they had no infrastructure to support them. The company that made them wouldn't, maintain them or anything, and they were all eventually trashed. So no matter what you're doing, if it infringes upon the oligarchy, they're going to find a way to crush you. And I'll bet you, listen to this.
An ideology that was somewhat obscure to an idea that was needed and drill in the urgency behind it. And that required us to really hone in and focus on 3 levels of organizing. And one was reaching out and engaging with the Democratic Party to help make this idea politically safe, to move it further into the political mainstream and help legitimize public banking as something that wasn't seen as far.
So she's gotten together with the oligarchy and made a deal that they think they can work within the confines of capitalism.
Left radical, but something that...
Or maybe all they're doing is kind of stalling her, and then they'll just eat her up with all what we're going to find out right here.
That was inevitable, an inevitable evolution of this financial system, catering to the democratic ideals of being able to provide affordable credit to communities, empowering communities, being able to invest in communities. Another way we were able to succeed.
So affordable credit, which means that, I mean, even if I don't think she's even going to make it, but even if she does, she's cut a deal with the oligarchy, with the capitalists.
Was building a broad-based coalition to combat the Wall Street private interests. There were about 9 lobby groups that were lobbying to kill this bill through the committees, representing private finance and.
So they picked their pretty face to represent the deal being made.
Government and big government. So we had to create a diverse group of people.
We had to make a deal.
Power representing elected officials, cities. There were 17 cities.
A deal that they will be just as determined to quash as they were before when they did quash her. I don't say her. I mean, she's just. Who knows how she got to be the face, you know. I guess because she's absolutely gorgeous, right? And sex sells. Sex sells what?
And counties that came on to actually sign resolutions endorsing AB 857, the Public Banking Act, which would enable cities and counties in California to create public banks. We had the support of over 180 community organizations, national organizations, some of the biggest labor unions in the state of California, which further helped legitimize the idea and bring that political power that we need. And then thirdly, we had to coordinate an incredible inside-outside strategy, working together with legislators moving from the inside and grassroots activists coordinating pressure from the outside. And those 3 things together really helped us essentially hack the system and take on the Wall Street lobby without any funding.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is called organizing, but a lot of people have, it seems to be a craft that has.
Yeah. She had no funding because there isn't a public bank. You know, chicken the egg kind of thing. I can't get to work because I don't own a car. I can't buy a car because I can't go to work because I can't get a job.
Been lost over time for a lot of organizations. You know, what kind of efforts and tricks were the big banks involved in trying to stop you, and Wall Street trying to stop you? And do you have any idea as to what else they have coming down the road?
Well, they testified against us through committees. They lobbied behind the scenes in Sacramento. And as they were walking through the halls, we had to bring a lobbying force up in Sacramento. And we coordinated an incredibly high caliber team of organizers. These weren't just your typical activists. These were lawyers, retired doctors, executives, young professionals, students, who are all united and educated on the talking points to be able to communicate to legislators about the importance of this bill. And essentially how we were able to beat Wall Street was by recalibrating what it means to be an activist. It's not something that is necessarily has to be confrontational. It's about being able to respectfully sit down and build a relationship and build camaraderie with legislators to be able to inspire them to move this bill forward. And that was what we were successful in. You know, they testified against us in committee. They pulled senators and assembly members off of the floor to try to get them to flip their vote. They released op-eds that were packed full of misinformation, which then we had to lobby to counter that in Sacramento and also in district.
You mean they lied?
And, a key part of our win was being able to establish a statewide formidable front line of organizers representing 10 cities in California, from Los Angeles to San Francisco, from Oakland to Santa Rosa to San Diego, activists, public lobbyists who were able to combat their misinformation directly with legislators all the way through.
And what are your next steps now that starting a public bank is actually legal?
Remember the show The Big Valley? What a load of propaganda that was, huh? How the rich family was for the people and stood for the people. That's Sacramento. That's where they had to go and beg, basically, for a public option.
Well, now that it's legal, the fight pivots back to the city level. AB 857 is going to be implemented as a pilot program, which means the Department of Business Oversight is enabling 2 public bank licenses to be issued to 2 cities a year over the 7-year period with a maximum of 10 public banking licenses. So over the next 7 years, the California Public Banking Alliance will coordinate the rollout of these public banks. We are going to have to go through a much more technical process involving legal and financial experts to take
which they control.
Take us through the creating a business plan or a viability study, which then has to be approved by the local governing body. That viability study then has to be approved by the DBO. Then it has to be approved by the FDIC for insurance, and then the Federal Reserve. So there are various levels of fail safes before.
So the Federal Reserve, if they ever get there, will have the say in what happens with this.
Public bank can happen, and it's going to be, a multiple-year process, but this is a huge step. California, the 5th largest economy.
And I've heard of lots of people doing stuff like this, but you don't hear about them anymore. In India, some guy set up basically public banking so that women could have small businesses and, survive, not starve to death. Well, people are still starving to death in India, and I don't hear anything about the public banking that was set up.
In the world took a bold step against the Wall Street status quo to say enough, and so that we feel that we are.
And we keep saying enough is enough with the status quo and the Wall Street and all this shit, but our hopes hang on Bernie Sanders and the squad and the few progressives who we hope we're going to vote into office. And they're fighting tooth and nail against this. And in fact, they will probably win in the end. But hopefully not.
We are at the peak of a potential financial revolution.
It really depends upon the American people, and if they feel too secure in what they have now, the status quo, then the rich will get together with them and say, let's keep our money where we've got it and not allow it to seep out into the rest of the community.
Is reshaping finance, re-envisioning what money means, how redirecting the flow of money into our economies. And, it's an incredibly revolutionary moment. And we hope that our success in California is going to inspire activists and advocates across the country to take this fight at the city level, at the state level, and really challenge Wall Street and create a network of public banks across the state of not only California, but across the country.
Okay, and in the meantime, you're going to have to deal with this.
The Cyclone Rake. This game-changing leaf and lawn vacuum will overhaul the way you do yard work. Clear
endless capitalism at every level.
So after waging a class war on the working class for decades and lobbying the federal government to shift the tax burden away from them and onto the working class, all of a sudden, the rich are wondering why they're getting so much pushback, why we're talking about a wealth tax, why they're being demonized and discriminated against by the working class. Now, if it's not obvious to them by now, it's never going to be obvious because we're sick of it. We are sick of rich people. We're sick of them shifting the tax burden onto us. We're sick of them having it all. So we're at a time where income inequality.
Not only that, but the system is set up so that they benefit from taxes and we don't.
Is at an all-time high, where wealth inequality persists, when people can't even afford to put food on the table, and we have a bunch of whiny billionaires crying, especially now that we're talking nationally about a wealth tax. And I find it absolutely enjoyable because whenever a billionaire cries, that makes me very happy. It warms my heart. Now, I want to talk about Leon Cooperman, who is a multi-billionaire hedge fund manager, who has been especially vocal and outspoken about the wealth tax. And he's so mad about the...
And why is it that enough Americans side with these people? Well, mainly because they think they somehow are going to get a benefit from it. And the rich play a game, a numbers game, and a lamestream media game, you know, in producing all these people who will sympathize with them and sympathize with their promise that they're going to make Americans rich.
Prospect of wealth tax that he penned an angry open letter to Elizabeth Warren after she dared to suggest that billionaires like him should pitch in a little bit more. And in an interview on CNBC, he explained why the wealth tax...
And the fact is that when you look at the numbers, only, I think, 4% or less of Americans actually become financially secure out of all the people.
Is...
But they're going to convince people that it's much higher than that in order to get them to vote against their own interests, right? I mean, that's really what's happening.
A very bad idea. Take a look.
Well, I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money. Just tell me what you think the maximum tax rate should be. Stop talking about 2% where you're basically misrepresenting the facts. It's 2% of wealth. Just think about this. If Jeff Bezos' wealth is tied up all in Amazon stock, he's going to be forced every year to sell 2% of his stock, regardless of what the outlook is for the company. That's just...
But his wealth is not tied up in his stock. He has a mountain of cash, a mountain of resources, a mountain of power to work with, and even a 2% tax on his wealth wouldn't amount to diddly squat when it comes to stopping him from, you know, being a vampire.
Well, I'll tell you, he's worth an estimated $106 billion in net worth. So,
sorry, I fucked it up.
We're all searching for what surprises us, inspires us, and pushes us further.
Jeff Bezos' wealth is tied up in...
You're just morally wrong.
So let me get this straight. You don't want the government giving away...
Amazon stock. He's going to be forced every year to sell 2% of his stock, regardless of what the outlook is for the company. That's just wrong. It's wrong. It's going to lead to inappropriate actions in the economy that are counterproductive.
You're not the only one, by the way. You're not the only one who makes that point. In fact, I was going through Twitter this morning before, in preparation for our interview, and Mark Cuban the other day said a very similar thing. Wonders about the impact on the stock and other liquidity markets if people like you, other billionaires, maybe Bezos or whoever, is forced to sell stock, for example, to raise cash to deal with a wealth tax.
Well, I don't have the problem of concentrated wealth. I'm very diversified. My problem is I think what she's recommending or suggesting is just morally wrong.
So let me get this straight. You don't want the government giving away your wealth that you earned, but if they're giving it away, who are they giving it away to and for what? Healthcare? Education? So in other words, you don't want the money that you've made by being a greedy hedge fund manager to be taken from you and given to poor people for healthcare and education, but yet you call a wealth tax morally wrong. You're not the one with the moral superiority here, buddy. You're the one in the wrong. You are the one in the wrong. Now, he tries to reason with us a little bit, and he does this by defending Jeff Bezos. He says, think about this. If Jeff Bezos' wealth is tied up in Amazon stock, he's going to be forced every year to sell 2% of his stock.
Okay, Boomer.
Great. Is that supposed to be a negative? Jeff Bezos is the richest human being on the planet. He can afford that. He can afford that. But you see, the way that this individual comes off, and it, I think makes him even more insufferable, is he tries to pitch himself as a reasonable, nonpartisan person. And maybe he is nonpartisan. He probably only cares about one thing, his wealth. But he doesn't like Elizabeth Warren. He doesn't want anyone who's even moderately progressive to win. But he also doesn't like Donald Trump. And no, it's not the fascism that he doesn't like about Donald Trump. He doesn't like that Donald Trump isn't presidential enough and is too mean. So he reacted to the state of affairs, the possible choice between, Elizabeth Warren and Donald Trump. And it literally brought him to tears. Not kidding.
I mean, I think it's kind of obvious people can not only see the emotion on your face, but hear it in your voice when you talk about this, Lee. Why?
I care. That's it.
That is so pathetic. Wow. Life must be so hard for him. I'm so sorry. Like, maybe we are being too hard on billionaires. So let me try to reason with him. He tried to reason with us. Let me try to reason with him. Okay, you don't want the wealth tax? Fine. I'll give you one of two options. Either we impose a wealth tax on the rich, or we eat the rich. Which one would you prefer? Because those salty tears would be delicious with your flesh. So pick one. Because, you can only hoard your wealth for so long before the working class, before the peasants take to the streets with pitchforks and come after you directly. So which one do you want? You've been waging this class warfare. Your class has been the ones that initiated this class warfare. We didn't choose to start this. You did. So now we're just responding, and we're asking, very reasonably so, I think, to pitch in so you can help us out. Just a little bit. But that's too much. So, billionaires are absolutely insufferable, and there was a reference to Mark Cuban in that first clip, and I forgot to throw in a fuck you to him as well. But I don't want to be too hard on Mark Cuban, on, Leon Cooperman, because there's another billionaire that I want to talk about, Bill Gates. Excuse me. And he's someone who, even though he doesn't like Donald Trump, well, he also isn't too keen on the idea of a wealth tax as well. And he didn't rule out possibly going chud in order to protect his own wealth.
Okay, so let me make it complicated for you. You've been, politely say, public about your misgivings about our current president. If Elizabeth Warren were the other candidate, what would you do?
I'm not going to, make political declarations, but I do think no matter what policy somebody has in mind, a professional approach is even, as much as I disagree with some of the policy things that are out there, I do think a professional approach to the office, whoever I decide would have the more professional approach in the current situation probably is the thing that I'll weigh the most. And, I hope the more professional candidate is an electable candidate.
But what do you think of this larger idea that underneath all of this, you hear people who say there shouldn't be billionaires in society, that if you really understand what this wealth tax is about, in fact, one of our authors at the New York Times describes it almost as a cigarette tax with the ultimate goal of there being less of it.
Maybe I'm just too biased to think that if you create a company that's super valuable, that at least some part of that you should be able to have a little bit for consumption and hopefully the balance to do philanthropic things.
So he was very obviously tap dancing around that question, but by not answering the question, he gave you an answer inadvertently. He would consider voting Donald Trump. He would not rule out voting for Donald Trump and going full chud in order to protect his wealth. Unbelievable. And people like to say that Bill Gates is one of the good billionaires. I hope that this dispels that myth once and for all. There are no good billionaires. If you are a billionaire, if you are greedy enough to get that much wealth, you are inherently a bad person. Period. Billionaires should not exist. And yes, we should confiscate that wealth. And if you're against wealth confiscation, then you should be speaking out against a particular type of wealth confiscation that affects the poor and working class. It's called civil asset forfeiture. So if a police officer pulls you over and sees that you have a lot of cash and thinks that maybe that will be used for something illegal, they can just take that money from you. So we already have confiscation in this country, and I don't hear the anti-confiscation people speaking out against civil asset forfeiture. So if we can have that go on uncontroversially, then it's time we get real. We need to take their wealth, and really, it's a misnomer to say that that's their wealth, because you can't earn $1 million. That's not your wealth. You stole that by exploiting the labor of your workers. That's what you did. So really, by taking it back, we're just getting something that you stole from your workers. Period. Now, to really demonstrate how greedy he is, of course, he said that billionaires should exist. That's a shocker. He also went on to talk about how much he's willing to give away, because he's so charitable, you know. He's known for his philanthropic endeavors and whatnot. Okay. This is going to prove to you once and for all what a greedy piece of shit Bill Gates is.
You know, I've paid over $10 billion in taxes. I paid more than anyone in taxes. But I'm glad to have paid, if I'd had to pay $20 billion, it's fine. But, when you say I should pay $100 billion, okay, then I'm starting to do a little math about what I have left over. Sorry, I'm just kidding.
What a funny joke. Look, he brags about the fact that he paid $10 billion in taxes. Great. He tried to make it seem as if he's reasonable because he'd even be willing to pay $20 billion. But when you start talking about $100 billion, then you're really talking about bleeding him dry. I mean, come on, let's be reasonable here. If we take $100 billion from Bill Gates, what's going to be left for him? Well, I'll tell you. He's worth an estimated $106 billion in net worth. So even if we took $100 billion from Bill Gates, he would still be a multi-billionaire with double the wealth of the first billionaire dickhead we heard from at the beginning of this segment. And Adam Best summed it up perfectly. He says in this tweet, even if someone was asking Bill Gates to pay $100 billion in taxes, and nobody is, he would still have more money left over than Oprah and Richard Branson combined. In reality, his rate would either be 3% or 8%. The billionaire pity party is pathetic. Now, Warren's wealth tax did tick up to 6% to fund Medicare for all, but regardless, think about this. Let's put this into perspective for everyone. Out of every single one of your paychecks, you pay a payroll tax. In some states, you pay a payroll tax to your state government, right? If you own a house, you pay property taxes to a local government. Every time you go to the store, you pay a sales tax on items that you purchase. So you pay all of your taxes. But when we ask billionaires to chip in 6 to 8 cents, this is what happens. They throw temper tantrums and become unraveled. And the elephant in the room is that these billionaires don't realize that if Elizabeth Warren is the nominee, that's better for them than if Bernie were the nominee, because Bernie Sanders is going to be harder on the rich and the billionaire class than Elizabeth Warren would be. So in the event Bernie Sanders were the nominee, could you imagine the reaction? They would be begging for an Elizabeth Warren nomination because Bernie Sanders is that much harder on them because that's what's warranted. If you have $1 billion less than both Leon Cooperman and Bill Gates have, that is a sum of money that is so large you will never be able to spend it in one lifetime, in 10 lifetimes. Because once you've purchased 3 or 4 mansions, once you've purchased, your dream car and a private jet and a yacht, what do? You're never going to be able to spend that money. So what we're talking about here is extreme wealth. This level of wealth that people like Bill Gates have is unsustainable because in a capitalist system, money equals power. And when you have that much money, you have a lot of power. So what we need to do is tax the hell out of billionaires like Bill Gates and Leon Cooperman, and if they cry, good, because that means that we're just doing what we need to do to deliver public goods and services to the people in this country who need it the most, the working class and the middle class. So, Cry Me a River, I absolutely have no sympathy for them. Keep crying, because it's only...
Mike, what about the poor?
making us hate you even more, you greedy pieces of human trash.
Okay, so this concludes our economics portion of our show, and I think that's going to be it for tonight. I'll leave you with a song. And I just want to reiterate something I've reiterated many times, and that's there's a solution to this problem, and Mike doesn't get it. You have to be able to play the money game. You have to be able to understand economics, and Mike doesn't really understand them because there's a more sophisticated way to beat these guys, and that is tell them, look, we won't take any of your money. In fact, we will guarantee you that you and your family, and maybe even to a certain extent your thugs and your goons and everything, are going to be guaranteed your lifestyle in perpetuity, as long as, you know, the United States continues to exist. So how can you argue with that, right? Guarantee them. They'll always be able to send their kids to, you know, the best college. They'll always get to go on those big ski vacations. They'll always get to have the yacht, you know, if they're that rich, because it'll freeze as of now, right? So they'll always be able to get and have the lifestyle that they have now. Now, what do we want in return? We want them to get out of politics. We want them to get out of economics. So they would no longer be involved in the economy. And by the way, a guy like Bill Gates, he has nothing to do with Microsoft now. I mean, he didn't invent Windows. And Windows is a natural progression of the operating system. You know, they were talking about GUIs, graphical user interfaces, for years. And the natural evolution of that is Windows, what we got right now. And every operating system would be a windowed type system. Either that or a menu type system, but no matter how you look at it, it would be set up for ease of use by you and me when we use our computers, right? It would be effective. And effective is based on reality. Okay, now I'm getting away from this. So when he claims that he wants control of Microsoft, he wants to be the owner, he wants to get the money for it, well, obviously, if we guarantee him his lifestyle, freeze it right now. I mean, he, in the capitalist system, he could lose it all. Right? So this is far better. what they won't like is the fact that they would be barred from politics and from the economic system. And then they could have all their money. They could sit on it. Because really, when you look at it, what's $100 billion going to do for you? So let them choke on it, right? And then what we would be doing by forcing them out of the economic and the political system is taking back the power that we need to build wealth in the poor, pull them up out of poverty, right, and build wealth in the rest of the people, right? All the other people who wouldn't get this guarantee, because that's the only thing in between us and the proper management of this country. Is that control, getting them out of the way. Just like we have to get the establishment Democrats, yeah, Freudian slip, out of the way before we can get to the Republicans. So we need to get them out of the economic system, the political system, and of course the political system includes the justice system and the law enforcement system, the economic system includes the banking system, which they stole from us because they have no right to make money under the Constitution. Somebody back when had the sense to tell rich people that they would not control the money, that it would be controlled by the government, which is controlled by the people. And then you had the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 or 03 or whatever, whenever it was. So, and I'm not saying make a deal with them. I'm saying we tell them that's the deal. And then when they cry and moan, and we tell them, you got no right to cry and moan. We're guaranteeing you your lifestyle. And after all, isn't that all that power and money is about? Your lifestyle? In case you're not paying attention or you can't figure it out or whatever your fucking problem is, and I say that to all the people who don't give a shit about my show, which is apparently everybody, because I've got 0 people watching it. I'm just making it for myself. what I'm talking, this is a highly political song, and not only do I think it's a great song, I love the sound, the way I put it together and everything, but are you listening to these lyrics? You know, for those of you who aren't, I think you should pay attention to them, because I talk about myself as being, you know, having all these gifts and everything. Well, this song is amazing. Sit on barbs of and razors made from your ignorance. I'm saying, I'm prophesizing. I'm saying that for all of you that I can't really see the words right now, but if you listen to them carefully, it says, for all of you who sat upon the fence, the people who, I'm talking about that other 50% of America that falls for this bullshit that the capitalists feed them. And it says, for all of you who sit upon the fence, will, you know, will sit on barbs and razors made from your indifference. I mean, that's fucking poetic, man. Fucking poetic. If it was somebody else's song, I'd listen to it every day because it's my song. I don't really feel the need to, but it's fucking awesome. And they won't feel the glory of the victory at the last, only the undoing of their history and their past. Come on, man. Give me a break. This shit is awesome. I really think somebody's paying attention to a song like this that I've written because it scares them. Because it's so fucking awesome and it says things so profound. You know, that they tell their, I mean, they probably tell their record companies, hey, don't pay attention to this guy. We don't want him going anywhere. The innocent who suffered fight the armies of the damned. This is Revelation here. This is the future. Without their chains and shackles, they will take back all the land. You notice the picture? A child being killed by an Israeli helicopter in Gaza. The evil in their hopelessness keep on, because even though they think they're on top, they're in a constant state of hopelessness. Keep pawning off their souls. They sell their souls for everything that they've got. Their flesh burned off, their souls set free, they finally heed the call. So in death or desperation, whatever comes first, they finally say, okay, we knew you were right all the time, all along. got all of these images off of Google. You know, when you Google something and then you type in, you know, a word or something. So Google, you make all this possible. You make it all. You publish all these images, and you know, I have a perfect right to use them in my videos. And yeah, some of them are disgusting. Like this is a picture of a guy blown to pieces in a drone attack. That's what's left of his head. Obviously, I'm just copywriting the music. The Google images are just publicly available on the internet. They beam them into my house. I think I have the right to use them in my videos. And the rest of this is video that I took storm chasing. So that's it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. It's in 2 parts because, gee, YouTube went down in the middle of me talking about Jeff Bezos and his invasion of privacy. Even if it's coerced out of people, you know, through whatever means. This is Progressive News Live with Martin Drummond. November 8th, 2019. I hope you all have a nice weekend. If you can, after watching that show.